All ever become a reality in America? Some fear any nuclear, biological, or chemical attack on U.S. territory might trigger just that. And as KSLA News 12's Jeff Farrell discovered, the clergy would help the government with potentially their biggest problem, us.
From my cold, dead hands.
Charlton Heston's famous declaration captures a truly American value, the overarching desire to protect our freedoms. But gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. U.S. troops also arrived, something far easier to do even now thanks to last year's elimination of the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. That forbid U.S. troops from policing on American soil. If martial law were enacted here at home, like depicted in the movie The Siege, easing public fears and quelling dissent would be critical. And that's exactly what the Clergy Response Team, as it's called, helped accomplish in New Orleans.
Jeff, the primary thing that we say to anybody is let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over.
Such clergy response teams would walk a tightrope between the needs of the government versus the wishes of the public.
In a lot of cases, these clergy would already be known in the neighborhoods in which they're helping to defuse that situation.
For the clergy, one of the biggest tools that they will have in helping calm the public down or obey the law is the Bible itself, specifically Romans 13.
Because the government is established by the Lord, you know, and that's what we believe in the Christian faith. That's what's stated in the Scripture.
Civil rights advocates believe the amount of public cooperation may depend largely on how long they expect a suspension of their rights might last. Jeff Farrell, KSLA News 12 reporting.
And according to Tuberville, during Hurricane Katrina, the clergy response team provided 38 chaplains a day around the clock at 8 different camps.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government and the rule of law in case of a devastating terrorist attack or natural disaster. A plan that provides for the cooperation, the coordination, and continued functioning of all 3 branches of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate and doesn't really tell us what they have in mind. But they said, don't worry, there's a detailed classified version. But now they've denied the entire Homeland Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government. They say, trust us. Trust us, the people who brought us Katrina, to be competent in face of a disaster. Trust us, the people who brought us warrantless wiretapping and other excesses eroding our civil liberties. Trust us. Maybe the plan just really doesn't exist, and that's why they won't show it to us. I don't know. Or maybe there's something there that's outrageous. The American people need their elected representatives to review this plan for the continuity of government.
Gentleman's time is...
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, you do have those standby provisions, and the plans are there, and the statutory emergency plans are there, whereby you could, in the name of stopping terrorism, apprehend invoke the military and arrest Americans and hold them in detention camps. In times of passion and in times of great fear, what to the eyes of the person and the mind of a person in time of relative peace and stability seem impossible, become very real, very logical, very possible.
March of this year, I was invited to attend a meeting, a local meeting of the Emergency Management Agency that we call it the local FEMA people. I was invited to come because I had done disaster relief work with another church denominational group years ago, and I wanted to see what was going on. They were planning for any kind of bioterrorism, they said, so I wanted to find out what it was, it being FEMA. That was wonderful stuff when they started out, but it immediately turned into this is for a natural disaster, a tornado, flood, or any act of bioterrorism, or a nationally declared emergency. And so I lit up to that one, and the spokesperson there was from the state FEMA office, who also was the trainer for pastors in their training program for pastors. He said, your job, pastors, is to get to your congregations and preach to them Romans 13. And that's the part that says you obey the higher powers. And he was saying you have to teach them to obey their governments.
By the way, Hitler did that. He had a cohort of preachers that preached Romans 13 out of context.
Yes, he did. And this is what he wanted us to do. And so he's telling us that. He's telling us, and the thing that really got us started on this, and when I started contacting people, is when he said the problem with local enforcement of a federal or state mandate that is quarantine or relocation, and these are the terms he used, or a declaration of martial law based on whatever disaster it might be.
He said martial law. Let's be clear.
Yes, he did. And he said if it goes the distance, the problem is all along the way is this so-called cowboy mentality, and you pastors are going to have to learn to quell that cowboy mentality. And so I asked him what he meant. He said, the individualistic effort that stands up and said, this is my property, you'll pry guns from my cold dead hand kind of thing. And everybody laughed. There were only about 6 people there. And he said, we're talking about law enforcement. That's a law enforcement issue. We're talking about you pastors going there because you know the people, you all are trusted, and you'll be preaching this ahead of time. You can stand in the neighborhoods and tell people this is for their own good. This is deadly real. And that was our first meeting. The second meeting pretty much carried it through with our responsibility as pastors is to have training. And this man, who is a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, he's also on a national organization for disaster relief. He's also working with DHS and FEMA. He's on their payroll. We just found this out last week. He said that your pastor's jobs are going to be to deal with the individuals, not just in counseling, but you're going to have to control some folks who may not be so cooperative. He said, but that's going to be a law enforcement issue. You'll be backed by that. And he said, besides, pastors aren't trained to handle everything. We get the picture that me and others who are aware of this, that we're going to be standing at some farmer's end of his lane while he's standing there with his double barrel wherever he's got, telling him to lay the arms down. They have to confiscate your cows, your chickens, your
and he's got to be relocated to a camp. Now, for those that don't know, right here in Austin, we've confirmed some of the biggest churches are now FEMA officers secret. The church, and little do you know, this guy is an actual servant of the Antichrist beast system.
And this is what's so frightening. It started out. He made it sound like it was a local thing that we were doing, and we're the pioneers, we're the first one.
They always say that.
They always say that, and I knew what was coming. Just last week there was training for pastors, which we'll get into at some point. I haven't faxed you the training manual. The training manual pretty much keeps pastors down by telling us we cannot handle all these mental health issues.
Now, I know.
We were told then that we can't handle everything, so there'll be the professionals there helping us out. But we were told we would have to take mental health training. And to make it palatable to the other pastors, and these are their words now, that we won't call it mental health, we'll call it spiritual care. And so they've renamed everything. Instead of mental health and disaster relief, it's spiritual care.